So this is In the Room with Garvin and George, and this is season 4, episode 5, fifth one now. And Garvin said, don't say that you don't know where we're going, because we do know where we're going. and we do. We've got a topic this week, which has come about through a number of things that we've been looking into, and also because the films that we've been working on. And we're talking about a film called NDE, which is Near Death Experience, or NDE. And we're talking about The Visitors, which is about an angel that comes to see an old fella and reflects back other times that she's appeared in his life. So Garvin and I got into a little conversation yesterday, and we suddenly went, oh, that would be an interesting subject. Explain why you thought that was going to be an interesting subject based on the connection that you have with someone in your village or town. Do you remember?
Well, we talked about angels, funny enough. And again, I was only questioning because would you be interested in this retreat? There's a retreat up the road, and I'm not well informed on it. It's only snippets of information from you hear when in coffee shops of someone talking at the next table that this is going on and it's near you. And it's not that I've been bombarded with ads or adverts. Actually, it's a very select few that get to go to this retreat. It's for those that, for want of a better word, believe or are interested in angels. No, the woman in question, I don't even know her name off the top of my head. She's famous for writing a book, which is about her experiences of maybe seeing angels everywhere or around people or around her. And I could be paraphrased. I've no idea. That's what I think it is. But what I believe it is up there is people are going and they have retreats and they're talking about their own experiences or their own beliefs in angels. And maybe they're missing one and wanting one, and they don't see it, but they want to believe, or maybe they do believe and have seen and are explaining what this being looks like or doesn't look like, or what it does or doesn't do, or any of the above. Well, just the mere fact that George is a deacon of the church, I was going, is this something you believe in? Now, only in the context of the word angel for a second, going, well, if you're in the church and you believe in God and his angels and his disciples, well, then it's in that language. But then I was more questioning in the context of, do you believe someone else is seeing them on a regular basis and can communicate with them and can do good by them? And would you go to this retreat as an example of being a target customer potentially? And that's more where the conversation was starting. So I'll throw it back there going, do you believe in angels?
And the answer is, yeah, I do. And I think it's one of those ones where you kind of, as you move through and develop your spiritual journey, there is this sense that there is something there. But my response to Garvin's question was, I would be a bit conscious of wanting to know which angels, because that is the crux of are they good angels or bad angels? And that's where the conversation then went, because what comes from a kind of Christian perspective, this is right across the different denominations, is that biblically there's the talk of angels. We know that at the Annunciation that Mary was visited by Gabriel. There's also the talk of the war in heaven, where Michael the archangel cast out a third of the angels that rebelled against God. And more recently, in fact, it was yesterday or the day before, I was watching something and they were kind of going, well, why did the third of those angels get rejected? Because they were talking about, because it's the third, and they're talking about the Holy Trinity, God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And it turns out that the rebellion was because Satan and his lot of angels were actually disgusted that God had actually was going to send his son down as a human being, who were lower than the angels. And he was rather put out by this and was absolutely anti the whole concept that you should make a man, which is going to lead into some very interesting topics later on when we get into some of the areas I was actually thinking about. But let me just go back. There is, I just want to, the reference, there's a couple of references that are in here, and I just want to see, I knew somebody was talking about in the Catechism. So I'll just read this out. It's from Catholic.com. It says, the Catechism of the Catholic Church is clear about the existence of angels. The existence of the spiritual, non-corporal beings that sacred scripture usually calls angels is a truth of faith. And the witnesses of scripture is as clear as the unanimated of tradition. Got that one wrong. But St. Augustine says angel is the name of their office, not their nature.
Ah, there's a weird one. Function.
Yeah, it's a function.
Back to the language we were using the last day.
We were talking about that before, and I think that was really quite good. So if you seek the name, let me have a look. So angel is the name of their office, not of their nature. If you seek the name of their nature, it is spirit, whereas we're part spirit, part flesh, physical. So there's that kind of physical nature, which again becomes very interesting because we've often had conversations about multiverses and stuff like that. And from a biblical perspective, if you like, there is a multiverse because there's the spirit world and there's the physical world. So there's two different ones. The universe that we recognize and talk about is a physical entity that exists, but there's also a spiritual world that wraps around it.
No, I'm going to stop you for a second because I'll forget this if I don't jot in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the word what's coming to mind is, spirit, now soul. And I'm saying, okay, Christ or God might have been, angel made man or God made man. But at the same time, angel made man being spirit wrapped in flesh is us. So maybe, what it is, mankind are not fallen angels, but angels on a journey wrapped in flesh, a spiritual being going on journeys and are based on their nature, are good or bad.
Well, see, the thing is about good and bad is what is good and bad, because based on the biblical concept, it's because the devil rebelled against God and didn't want to serve God in the way that was being asked. He basically rebelled and then became the king of liars, basically. So there's a lie that we see around us. He's seen as the Lord of lies, and that's where. So you're talking about we're both spiritual and physical, and what is seen to connect us is the soul. Now, how we do that, I don't know. But the interesting thing about psychology is that ever since psychology has been around, they've been trying to find out where's the connection between God and the physical part in the way that our spirit connects to the body. Now, I know you were talking about angels within us, but angels are purely physical. They can influence us, but they can't do what human beings.
I'm going to stop you on that one because we're now saying angels at the beginning of the sentence were spiritual beings, but now they're physical. Now, physical is not okay. Physical as opposed to material.
Yeah, angels and demons are not physical.
No, I thought what you just said was...
No, they're not. No, they're not physical. We, human beings, have a spirit within them, but that's not an angel. And we're seen to be, because we're made of the dust.
I'm going to have to record this and play it back because you said they were physical and you might have just picked up wrong. But maybe I'm wrong now. But
let me correct that, because basically, even what I read back from the catechism there, it's saying that they are purely spiritual. They're not physical. They can't be physical. What the issue was that God chose his son to be a physical being like us as human being. And that is what the angels, that's what Satan and his crowd, as in Lucifer at that time, could not accept. They could not accept.
There's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Is to be is to be physical. It's not to be. Well, I don't mean it's to be. If you're spiritual and you're not material and you're not physical, then you're not being. And because a human being, as opposed to spiritual soul released back in energy. And we talked about this before in many a show ago, maybe it was universe. And, we were saying about the universe +1 and +1 equals God. Actually, the definition was all. It's all encompassing. On that basis, you don't need to explain any part of it because the mere word was all, and therefore we're not one, we're one with all, if that made sense.
Well, but then there's a biblical sense of what God is. And God, whenever he approached various different prophets, said, I am, I am. So what does I am mean?
Well, that's what I was getting at. The I am was I am all. I am being. Yeah. Well, I am is to be.
Is to be.
Well, he is being. Look, there's the thing. We're using this. He is being, and now we can't use the language of he anymore in most.
Who says?
Now, who is a different day, and that could be in this.
Yeah.
We don't really want to get into all that language, but in terms of the spirit, in terms of energy, see how I'm perceiving it is the energy. Yeah. So if everyone always exists in the energy field, and we go back to energy and nothing is destroyed and nothing is created, then all is always one. It's whole. And regardless of the universe and macroverse and microverse, it doesn't matter. It's all there. It might be changing forms, changing types, but it's all and one. And therefore, we are taking on a material journey. If we were to believe that our energy is really our soul internally, and that's the being that we are, and the body parts are just a material physical tool or vehicle, and when it goes and when it dies, the energy goes back to the universe to be recycled in whatever way or form, then nothing has actually changed. We are still one.
Yes. And what is one is God.
Yeah, well, that's a language.
No. The truth is, you've just now explained God, because God is the one. There is one God. I know Christians believe in
the. Well, they're ex-angels. If there's one God and we're all one, and actually, technically speaking, we've just explained that we are God.
No,
we are part of.
We're of God, but we're not God. And I think that's also the same with the angels. The angels are not God; they're of God. So they have that same kind of section. But the interesting thing there is that you've just now explained the fact that the interconnectivity of all of us, which is why I
love the fundamental interconnectivity of all things, which again is back to the same thing again.
But it does come back to the same thing, because every single human being is connected spiritually by that connection to God. Now, I mean, one of the things that I said before in one of the other episodes, it's amazing that we can communicate, but we can communicate because we have a commonality between us as human beings, regardless of what human being. The other thing is, and I've been finding this out about Thomas Aquinas, which I want to go back into my own studies at some point. That's what those books are up there somewhere. They probably won't be in the shop when we get it blown up. But he was actually saying that God is in everything. It doesn't matter what is in every single thing that's going on, even this glass and this piece of water that's there. He's in everything. He's right inside every single molecule, atom, whatever is the subatom of those sort of things as well. He's in everything. And I think one of the great things about science, because we live in a world that tries to put science in opposition to what is religious or spiritual, and yet it was many of the religious people and the church and again the Muslims were very much into the maths and all that kind of stuff. It was those spiritual people that followed through on a kind of scientific way of looking at things, because that was why we were encouraged to learn knowledge and why wisdom is so important. But wisdom is also seen to be a spiritual thing because that's the way the Bible portrays it as well. So one of the things that we find is there is no conflict in a lot of things that we're discussing, but we live in a world that is trying to tell us there is a conflict. And what we've also seen in this world is that divide, because what's important is to have the kind of conversation we're having now. We've got two different perspectives, not opposing perspectives, because one of the things is once you talk through the perspectives that we're saying, you suddenly recognize that what the other person is saying is actually similar to what you're saying, even though you're using a slightly different language. So there's a commonality between that, which I think is really good, because in your explanation, you came up with the fact there's only one, and that is the basis of all the monolithic, or whatever they call it, religions, as in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So they're talking about the oneness of God. There is, though, the recognition that there was a rebellion. And the rebellion is that this hate for God And we see that in conversations that people have. They get very animated and stuff. If you go back to the idea of demons again, because one of the things that sort of cropped up recently was it was talking about how at the end of our lives, the devil tries to capture our soul, to take it and rob us from God. This is just a perspective that you'll find out on the internet and everything else. And I was thinking about that, and I was kind of going, oh, right, that's very interesting, because I've had the experience with my own father 13 years ago. The situation that occurred was that my father-in-law, who was also dying of cancer, fell out of bed at 2:00 in the morning. We had a phone call, but it was an unregistered number, like you normally do when you get to ring a hospital. So I rang my wife to see if everything was okay. She said, well, look, my dad's fallen out of bed because she was staying with them. I've just got to go and sort him out. But maybe it's the hospital where my dad was in England and I was in England. So I rang the hospital and they said, yeah, your dad's just gone really off the top kind of thing. There's a guy in the bed next to him who's just died and your dad's just totally freaked out. Could you come in there and sort him out? So we went in to see him and saying, look, can you calm him? Nothing we can do can calm him down. So when I got talking to my dad, he was seeing demons flying around, coming out of everything. He physically seeing demons. And I thought, okay, maybe it's hallucination, because I knew my father-in-law had hallucinations, and he was seeing bluebirds flying out of the TV. And he was talking to his psychologist's son about this. And someone's kind of going, really? So you're seeing birds? He said, it's a bloody hallucination, son. Wise up. So that's what he was saying. But my dad was saying he was seeing demons, and they were quite horrified. It was sufficiently real enough that he was scared out of his wits, really, really scared out of his wits. So we managed to calm him down. And eventually a doctor came in. And the next thing my dad says, oh, my son's father-in-law fell out of his bed and hurt himself. And we were sitting there kind of going, who told him that? You know, how did he know? And the doctor, who was actually a Muslim fella, he was just as freaked out as we were, because there was a sense that somebody that had just left the world, my dad was witnessing a demonic attack to try and get that soul, and it freaked him out like nobody's business. My dad's not religious. My dad, you know, was angry with the church because the way a vicar had actually treated him when he was a kid. So he was a very angry church, but he was interested, and he talked about the spiritual things the way that you're talking about, Garvin, which led us into an interest in those sort of things. So there were events that were happening that gave us some sort of people's witness to something that had occurred. And you could say it's a hallucination because there was drugs, but also when you start to look into what certain beliefs are, there's another reality coming through that could, just as it was real to my dad. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've discovered through being a counselor, and so, you know, I'm seeing lots of people who are having these kind of experiences of emptiness and darkness, and there's an influence coming from, if you like, the demons, which are also the kind of fallen angels that we talked about. So those subjects are fascinating because we can explore stories within them and see different people's perspectives on that. Now, I've been talking quite a bit, so I need to let Garvin have.
I was going to say the last couple of words there is seeing is believing. I mean, we touched on that before. And if someone sees, then what they see, they believe because they see it. And they're not going to they might question the rationality maybe, but if it's physically there or manifesting that like something caught their eye or a shadow on the wall. The weird thing is, what you've talked about there has been in loads of films. And actually, you know, the very thing at the beginning of the conversation is if the devil is there, there's not even the right language. Let's say the devil is the opposite of God. He's zero and God is one. And effectively, if he's trying to collect souls, he's trying to collect energy. He's actually trying to take the score up. He's on a journey to one, the whole. If he wins, he is one. And God is none, you know, and therefore, if it's only our whole world is defined by 0 and 1, and everything else is a multiple thereof anyway, and therefore you either have it all or you have none. But if there's no fractions, you're on this journey of war of some, and where the weighting changes. If you get halfway there and it goes over that a fraction of the 50%, then power balance has changed, and the war is, won or lost if you get there. Currently, there is no, if you're not at the 50% mark, then the devil has not won and cannot win, because he's always, whatever that micro fraction of one will be, it's God will always win, because it's always more. But it's energy. As I said, it's trying to get ownership of the energy of the universe and move it, not necessarily from 0 to 1, good to bad, God to devil. It's a language. Actually, even earlier on, we were talking about the language of science is the language of God. Because what we're trying to do is this journey of prove or disprove, or not prove or disprove, but understand ourselves and everything around us. And with this language of science, we've created more tools that can look deeper in and further out. But it keeps on coming back. Every time you look deeper or further, you come back with more questions. It gets bigger and bigger everywhere we go. There's no end. It's all, but in our mind, there's no end, but it's always been there. Whether it be building itself as you're looking further and it's moving from somewhere else just to give you an interesting picture, it doesn't matter. It's there when we don't look. That's the strange thing. If we don't look at a microscope, is it still there? If we don't look out in the universe, is it still there? If we look internally into our dream world, it's still there, but we're not focusing on it. It's where our focus is and our awareness is what we probably only really bring to the conscious, I believe in. And therefore, I do believe if your father or father-in-law saw something, that veil is dropping, that the shadow world is moving, the focus is distracted with drugs or not, or age or tiredness. And as I said, if you're about to step into the next step of the next realm of this energy is leaving the material vessel, then it's about to go on a journey of spiritual soul, back into the universe, then that energy is up for capture or release. And that's so there's an awful lot of language interest there.
Yeah, I mean, and what's very funny is that there's a bit in Revelations where it talks about a woman who's about to give birth and the dragon's about to try and take the baby away. And that's actually supposed to be Jesus. And as soon as the baby's born, God takes the woman away. Well, actually takes the son into heaven and takes the woman to a safe place, and the dragon's frustrated again. But that's a story in the Bible. But we've been talking through what we've just been talking about is almost an echo of that same battle going on, even for every individual. But one of the things I think that's really good, which is why science is important, and there's a lot of science in religion. Now, some people say that religion is not rational, but there is a rationality to what we're talking about, because we're not just, I know they talk about going with blind faith, but most of us need some kind of evidence or something that is a witness. And usually, and I had a friend of mine who's an atheist, and I was talking about, well, we need to learn more about this and we need to learn more. And he says, no, George, he says, look, you have to rely on the studies and trust them. And I'm kind of go, whoa, hang on a second. You're an atheist. You don't have faith, but you've just told me to have faith in the work of other people, which does make sense, because if you're going to trial, you have to have at least 3 independent witnesses that verify what a certain action has happened, and the evidence is there to back that up. So that's where in science, you've got to have at least 3 independent sources to back up the statements. You'll also have oppositional statements as well. So again, we're finding that through science and through asking those questions, which are legitimate, how finite we are as human beings. That we're only here for a short period of time in the if we're talking about billions of years that the universe has been around or whatever, and we get, if we're lucky, 80 years on this planet, we're just a flash in the pan, and some people might say, or we're just an instance, and in biblical terms, they talk about the fact that to God's day is 1,000 years to us, but 1,000 years is a day. There's a lot of things that are going on that, our perception of things, and even our perception as from a baby through to an old man changes due to the experiences that we have on this planet and how we are open to things. Something that we've discussed in another episode is how we're being now, that the more childlike we become, the more open to possibilities and opportunities we are. And that's something that's also biblical. They encourage you to be childlike. And it's not being immature, it's having that. If you ever see a baby who has no way of communicating within a very few days of life and even into the first few weeks, it is finding ways to communicate to those around it. It may not understand, but it's testing things out. And most of the times, when you've got youngsters, they are trying to test the boundaries to see what can they do, what can't they do. I've seen my grandson suddenly kind of go, oh, I'm seeing that adult do this, I'm now going to do that. Right. No, you can't. You're too. No, they've done it. I'm going to do it. And in a way, we're doing the same thing. We're saying, right, we've seen those people over there do exactly what we want to do. We're now going to do it. And we have faith that we can do that.
Well, that's see, go, do, which is great. Actually, that's part of the show, don't tell. And now when we say show, don't tell, but now go do, which is what we want.
Absolutely.
But what's interesting again is we're talking about, with a child's mind or innocence. And actually, I was going down for a coffee there the other day, and there was a couple of kids playing under a park bench across the road and just hiding under the bench, using it as a tent or a cover. And there was no devices, and they were playing with a childlike mind, and it was just under a bench. And that was their universe, that was their world for that 10 minutes. And I was realizing, based on what you're even saying, the more we know, I think the less we know. The more we know, the more envy we suddenly have for things we don't have or we spot. And when we look at stuff, this is what I was really talking about. I was getting envious of watching programs, maybe, or jealous of things that exist somewhere else that may or may not exist. Might be real, might be made up, might be staged, but doesn't matter. It was making you have an emotive reaction to, I don't have that. Why don't I have that? Maybe I'm not competent enough or good enough, and so someone else must be better than me. Because I'm not saying that was going on, but it could be. But at the same time, when you didn't look at it, it didn't exist. And you weren't aware of it, and you were happy with what you were doing. And actually, if you thought, the simpler I was thinking, and the less distractions, the more just going for a coffee and having a chat with yourself, or using those moments better, it was much more enjoyable. And those other things exist or don't exist on the planet. And the whole thing here is the journey to childlike mind, I think, is a protection to go. The more we're getting closer to the end of the runway, which we were talking maybe a little bit in the last show, was we're getting conscious of this amount of time and what we've done, or what we've achieved, or what we were meant to do, or what the purpose was. Do we even know it? Whereas if we just ignored it for a second and just had a childlike wonder, then a flower, a bee, a bird, anything is enjoying that moment. And the rest is actually, I think, nearly the devil taking it away. It's actually, these other things, everything is actually a distraction to question you on your self-worth of happiness and being. And therefore, the less you have, the more you actually have, if you can actually be in the now of sorts, with the who's around and what's around, and maybe enjoying yourself, and not that you're starving or dying or dead. But these other things, don't get distracted. Don't seek it out. Most of the time, what you're being given is not what you think it is.
What's fascinating about what you've just now said, and the way you've said it, is really, really good, because in Christians' ways of thinking, you've actually been talking about sin. And most people kind of go, oh, but I'm not a sinner, I didn't do anything. But you've just taken ownership of a number of things that would be classed as sin. And you've actually, through reflection, managed to get them out of the way, which is really what confession is, which I'm not saying we're talking about confession, but one of the things that I think we get into thinking, I'm a good person, I'm not bad. And it's not about that. But what's happened is that you recognize that there are certain things that are going on that are not good for you, that they're actually bad, because they're making you desire something that is making you then feel uncomfortable, that is actually hurting you. Because if you then try to to get them, which may become an impossibility, you could end up wrecking things around your life, and destroying things. But you've recognized, you've now called those things out, and you've said, no, I'm being twisted in my mind to think a certain way. I'm being distracted to go and want those things. But in the reality, if I look at what I've got and appreciate that I've been given these things, I'm actually better off. And you're recognizing those things. So you're going through that process of, there's a kind of defense mechanism, which I think is really quite good. And most people, we've been told that sin is something really horrible, but it can be something really, really small. And we remember it says there's the devil in the detail. And that's where we're now talking about how we're being influenced or trying to be pulled off track by those evil forces, those negative forces. People don't like using those language that today because that kind of scares them. But we're actually talking through how we're experiencing those spiritual elements around us, both good and evil, because we do actually have a protector with us. From a Christian perspective, you actually have a guardian angel with you. And you remember the little old pictures from the old days, we used to see the devil here and no, it was maybe the devil, it was the angel here and the devil there kind of thing, trying to pull you in different directions. No, George, why don't you have the cigarette? It won't do you any harm, and then you get lung cancer. And, all those kind of, I mean, that advert that's on the television at the moment about the friend being the cigarette, and he says, yeah, he'll take me out whenever I want to go out kind of thing. And then one day I'm going to kill him. And you kind of go, woo. Those are amazing little things, because they're revealing a little bit more of that spiritual world that's around us that is affecting us physically. Because one of the things you were talking about, if you get so distracted and you get you're being influenced, like it's the same with these cameras. Like, there's an old camera that's about 40 odd years. I've got one here that's about 50. Another one here that is, I try not to get that to fall down. That one is literally a couple of years old. But if I look at all the adverts and things about, I should be now upgrading all my cameras, getting rid of all those other ones because they're all a waste of time. And I'm sitting there kind of going, I have a camera. We're talking about technology. I have a camera from 2004 that if you now picked it up, your hand feels sticky on the rubber. That camera is going to be gone fairly soon. It won't last 60, 70 years as some of these others, but we're always being made to feel that what we've got now is inadequate, it's inferior, it's not as good. We're being made to feel that you're not as good now, you're an old man, you've got nothing to offer, you're redundant, and why don't you go and top yourself in some cases. We're actually getting to that part with euthanasia where people are being made to feel, well, what's my worth? And one of the great things that's going on at the moment is that we're starting to work out our worth. We are starting to realize that we have something to offer, and we're on a mission, we're on a purpose. And I had a young fella that the other day talking to me about, I know I've got he's witnessed death recently, and he's kind of going, right, I know I could die tomorrow. I could be dying the next instant, but what have I done in that time? So he's not suicidal, which some people are getting because they're giving up on life. He's suddenly kind of going, well, I need to work things out. I've spent a year or so doing this and I didn't like doing it. And you kind of go, well, that's a good thing because you've learned from that experience. It wasn't wasted. And we're actually talking about that in the journey that we've been on. Nothing that we've done is wasted. It's all about teaching us something, trying something out, modeling it, seeing whether it works, trying different versions of it from different angles to see how things go. That's science. And that's rational ways of thinking things through to make sure that we can securely move forward without damaging those other things that we're responsible for. The homes we live, the marriages we have, the kids we have, so that we have the relationships that we have, that we want with them that are actually more important. And we're not rich. We're not rich financially, money-wise, but we are rich with other elements. And that richness we can share with other people, and we can make their lives so much better through their interactions with us, through sharing what we do have with those people. And you're doing that with what you're able to open up with your home to other people. You've mentioned something just shortly. we're helping people that are suffering, and we see lots of suffering in the world around us. A lot of people kind of go, well, look, why would a loving God let all those people down and let them? No, but that wasn't a loving God that tried to do those things. That was human beings deciding to take things on themselves. And I said this in a homily recently, a small number of people who are actually power fanatics. And literally you could talk about, there's a handful of people that you could talk about on the planet at the moment. They're actually influencing billions of people by either turning them against one another to fight one another, and they're prepared to use the most crazy weaponry to do so. And they think they're right in what they're doing. They think they're justified. And in reality, they're not justified in anything they're doing. And that's where you then start to look at, we're going back to this idea about evil and good and evil. What is good and evil? I'm seeing so many lies being told in mainstream media about certain events at the moment. And that the truth is not, they haven't listened. They've put out a headline and everybody believes that headline, but they've not gone into the detail and understood. That critical analysis has been lost. And I think that's something that is really, really important to, especially to get people to stop looking so inwardly on themselves and actually being very destructive to their own personality. We know that physically, if I hurt myself physically, if I break a bone, it actually upsets me mentally. But I also know that if my mind's not in the right place, my body will actually start playing up as well. So we are one. You talked about one. The mind and the body is actually one. It's not two separate things. They are integrated to one another. But quite often in work, if you had a physical ailment and you could physically see something, you were allowed to have time off. But if you were mentally unwell, you were looked at in another way, and it was, pull yourself together, lad. Don't be silly. And you kind of go, no, that's not the way to. There's something that's going on in that person's mind that's actually unsettling them to the point where they're actually being destructive in their own life. Those are the influences that we're seeing that are coming from, you could say, demonic forces. There's talk about it in lots of different literature, not only Christian literature, but other literature as well that talks about that. And one of the great things that we've been talking about, I mentioned a dream that I'd had where I saw an atomic bomb. I'd seen Air Force One talk out and what had happened. And you were straight away able to tell me the films that those references went back to. So we've seen so much movies that we can't tell whether or not, is that a message that's coming, or is that just that I've just seen a movie in the recent days that is influencing me? We're being blinded by so much information that it's very hard to work out what the truth is at times.
Now, blinded we'd be lucky if we were blinded, because then we wouldn't be able to see the information, and then we'd actually have our energy back.
But look at all the information here. Look at all this stuff.
The problem we're having is, most people on the planet now have a tool in their hands that effectively is sucking the energy, the soul out of you. Because it's robbing time. Because if you're just there looking at it, you might be hidden in it that says this is a motivational video, this, that, and the other. But for the moment that's in it, it's a vampire of time. It's sucking energy from you. It's going to make you feel tired. If it doesn't make you feel tired, it'll make you feel envious. It might not give you pain, but it can be painful. All these other, feelings afterwards could lead to that. And the thing is, it's killing you. The strange thing is, if it's taking your runway of time away, these tools are now killing you as opposed to making you better, it's not going to give you more time. It might educate you to displace, do one thing for another and gain some, but most of what's in there, unless you're really, really seeking it out, is robbing time, distracting you, and using up that, it's going to show you things that you're not doing, that you're not part of. Well, look what everyone else is at. And therefore, I think we do have to nearly detox away from them. And now here we are talking on something that's going to be put out on videos and on broadcasts. But at the same time, we have to weed ourselves down to a level of it. But when we're on it, we should be seeking particular things out, as opposed to letting it just feed us based on algorithms and basically hypnotize us into using our most valuable thing in the day. So I'm going to try and wean myself a little bit off the device, the phone. So I really need to go back to a brick. The Nokia, the back to the phone, it's for talking to someone. It's for making a phone call, it's for receiving a phone call. It's not for carrying a television around in my pocket or a cinema screen. Because I need to get back into the real world of communication, conversation. The user for that, that's the tool purpose. But back to childlike wonder, you need to, get lost in your own time. I know, and be enjoying the moments that are there, and with the people that you're surrounded by, and with whatever it is you're doing at the time. And the angel thing is, we back to this. Do we have a guardian angel? But I think nearly everyone would want one. And maybe the seeing believing, but if you believe you have one, you probably have. And it might only be your subconscious, that voice, that chatterbox, because we hear two voices, we speak with one and we hear another in our head. Well, I mean, it's what that voice is saying and what power we give it. And if we make it a good voice, I think we actually are able to communicate with that guardian angel. But if we give it a disempowering voice based on this other, feeds of social media that you're doing this, you're doing that wrong, why not? It's not going to empower us. It's going to take away. So that's the battle of the energy, field to rob your time or to empower your time. It's your own inner voice is your guardian angel, but the power you give it will dictate whether it's good or bad.
I think one thing that's more and more obvious is that, okay, so we were talking about demons and we were talking about angels, and one of the things that's quite interesting is that angels and demons have the same origin and they have the same nature. They're spiritual, so they haven't changed. They don't change in the same way that we might change. So they've actually been given tasks. Some have rebelled against it and some haven't, but their basic essence is constantly the same. Mm-hmm. They can't. Possession is something that apparently rarely happens. I've been watching lots of stuff about exorcists, but obsession is something that we see even in ourselves, that we become obsessed with certain things, and you're trying to work out, is it a good thing or a bad thing, and why do I need it? Why don't I cut back? And do I need all this other stuff, and do I not need it? And those become obsessions. So there is a sense of three voices that are going on at times. There's the one that is you. There's one that's you that's questioning what's going on. There's others where do those thoughts come from? And I know you're talking about the subconscious and the consciousness. I know that there's been things I've been trying to grapple with, and that's a meaningful comment, because I felt like I had an idea once in my head, several times, lots of times, but there have been times where it's been coming out of the subconscious, almost like an eel, and it's been as slippery as an eel, and it's been going back in, and I want to hang on to it, and I'm physically feel like I'm grappling with this idea and trying to pull it back into my consciousness so that I can work with it, but it won't. It just goes back into this unconsciousness. But I kind of personified that thing into an eel. Because as I visualized it, I'm seeing myself trying to fight with it to get that idea back into my head. And it's a way of working with it. And again, one of the things that we quite often have is these automatic negative thoughts. I'm using counseling, we all have those. Every single one of us, I have those as well, where the thing that comes out is self-sabotaging you. It's knocking you. It's putting you into a tailspin. It's also eating up your time and robbing you of stuff. But it's also activating all your senses. It's making you become anxious. It's making you catastrophize things that are really not a reality. And quite often the thoughts that come into your head are lies, just deliberately to make you off balance. And I'm now using that kind of word because quite often when you see people become so unbalanced, we kind of go, they've got a psychological problem. One of the things that's quite interesting is that exorcists, their first task is to psychologically find out whether or not the person can be helped. Is it a physiological problem that they're actually encountering that's through an imbalance of chemicals? Because that's a psychological way of doing. There are a lot of people And we know a few people who are suffering from the likes of fibromyalgia and stuff like that. And the doctors, I've spoken to doctors about that, and they say we don't want to go there because actually we can't figure that one out. We don't know how to figure that one out. So quite often, if the medical world, the physicians, the psychologists, and all those people can't help a person in a certain way, quite often then the exorcist is then saying, right, there's something demonic that's going on in that person. This is a kind of language that a lot of people now get scared with. That's the reason why they go to certain horror movies. But you're now seeing that sort of stuff coming out of the horror movies because it's too close to what people see as a reality. And, we are challenged by that. One of the things that in the last few years, I've actually woke up in the middle of the night, bolt upright, or on one occasion felt paralyzed. And I saw a dark figure over me, right? And I couldn't move. It was like, why can't I move? I can't move. And I thought, that's just me having an imagination. Now my wife, she said, I've had something like that. She said, right, bless the room quickly. And we blessed the room. Now, some people are saying, oh, it's all supernatural, sort of superstition, all that kind of stuff. But more recently, I've been finding information where other people are talking about those same kind of things. And from a religious perspective, they're seen as demons that are actually sitting over you, trying to rob you of something in your soul. And there are other activities that go on that also can be, you're being influenced in a certain way, in a negative way, that is destructive to your body and to your mental, way of thinking. This is where, from a Christian perspective, I think from a Jewish perspective and also from a Muslim perspective, and probably the Hindus and everybody else, that's where prayer then starts to come in, because you're asking for a defense mechanism. And there are defensive mechanisms that you can actually put up to try and block those out. One of the things that's quite interesting is we talked about distraction. The distractions is if you get focused on that distraction, you're taken away and you're led towards something that more than likely is destructive, okay? Sometimes you end up with these self-sabotage activities, which you think they're helping you. Some people have got a glass here, okay? Some people will start to take a little bit of drink. And before long, they're relying on that drink, something that was there as a comfort to try and help dull what's going on, suddenly takes over their life. And they're being literally possessed by the drink, And that's why they need to seek help to try and get that away from. And it can be very destructive. The same as gambling. People get in despair because they basically have got to a point where they can't make ends meet. So they start doing things thinking they're going to win something. And all that does, a lesson I learned as a kid with a sixpence was when I put sixpence in, I got 10. And very quickly the 9 went. And I realized if I put the last one in, I'm going to lose that. And I end up with nothing. So I kept the sixpence because my granddad had given it to me. That was just a lesson I learned as a 6-year-old. But one of the things is a lot of people start to gamble because they're hoping that they can get something that will help their lives. But I think we've found that, we don't take those risks because you're gambling too much on your home, on your marriages, on your friendships, which is what any kind of abusive thing is, because it's a destructive mechanism. From Alcoholics Anonymous, what they do is they take you through 12 steps, which is almost a form of exorcism. We don't like those kind of terminologies. I do exorcisms every time I do a baptism. If there's a mini exorcism that goes on in that side. What I was talking about there was we get distracted into going offline into something else. That tends to be, in the end, a demonic thing. When we can focus on the thing that we want to and can commit to that, we are being tempted as though we're being knocked off balance. But that's when, if we can focus on it and ask for the prayers to guide us or protect us, or use some kind of defensive mechanism, and we use that on the computer. Look at all the defensive walls, because there are so many things trying to get in. All the analogies are exactly the same, whether it's the computer being attacked by viruses and by malware and all that kind of stuff. It's all connected. It's all coming from the same idea and the same kind of concept. And it's what's filling our imaginations with ideas of things we can explore. The other thing that I want to just very quickly touch on is that even though we may be the only ones that get to see this, This is giving us an opportunity to record our thoughts as a dialogue, to explore things in a very safe environment that allows us to explore things that you wouldn't normally get a chance to explore. That means you get it out. You're releasing it by actually physically saying it. And that's why counseling, mentoring, and coaching has become so important, because it allows people to verbalize, to get it not just inside their head, but get it out so that they can work things out. And once they share it with somebody else, there's that idea of, problem shared is a problem halved. You're actually allowing it out. So words are powerful. And that actually brings you back to the religious thing, why the word is an important aspect of that.
Now, I'm going back to the slippery eel. Yeah. I'll be hanging on to him for a little bit, or her, or it, for a little while, because I think that's actually your purpose. I think everyone has a slippery eel, and they can't, some catch it early, some never catch it at all. And that's the whole point. It's trying to surface, but it keeps on going back in. And you're not too sure what it is or where it is or when it is. But if that's your purpose, that an awful lot of us haven't got a hold of that slippery eel. And it's very hard to catch it. And it's even harder to keep it, and keep it held down, and because it's going to keep on slipping and sliding. Unless you've got to turn a slippery eel into your pet. And that's what, in order for you to now be maintaining and be focused on your purpose going forward. So that's what I just sort of heard hidden in there is, an awful lot of people I know can't find the pool, can't find the pond the eel is in, don't know, won't recognize it, even if it was staring them in the face. And because he didn't reach in and grab it and pull it out and start to try and make more sense of it, because it suggests itself in strange ways. And that's what's, I think I'm on a journey closer to finding my purpose. And I think other people around me they have to let go of these other distractions, because they won't recognize their purpose. If we keep on looking at all this, what if you could, because there's too many things you could be, and none of that is real. That's not your slippery eel. That will already be. The weird thing is, I think that's back to the not the good and the bad and the devil and the detail and the zero and the ones, but more, we're all on a journey, on a pathway we have to, if we get the opportunity to get this eel earlier rather than later, or once along that journey, and as long as we're searching for it, we're going to be on the path. But if someone's not searching for it, then they've given up looking for their purpose, and then they have no purpose, and then they will be more easily distracted by these other thieves of time, of energy, and these energy, vampires are the devil that's going to take you away from your purpose. So I think I'm going fishing for a slippery eel, and I'm going to catch him, and I'm going to, tame him. And that's the journey I feel I'm now on.
Yeah, and I think that's important because, unfortunately, we've talked about the child mind, and quite often we become very curious about things, and we find our passions very early on. But then we go to school, and those passions are beaten out of us because we're told we're being silly, and we have to fit into a system, and we have to work in that system, and we have to obey that system, and we're not allowed to rebel against it, which again seems a bit odd because I'm using that sort of sense of rebellion. But there is a sense of requiring discipline in what we're doing. But if that discipline is overworked so that you don't have the freedoms and flexibilities to do what you've been put here to do, that's where things start to go wrong. And that they're wrong because they're actually preventing you from fulfilling what we've all been put here to do. We're not automatons. And I think that's something that we now see in our world that is quite interesting. We have gifts that we've been given. We're not all the same, but collectively we can utilize those gifts and do something quite powerful. But if we're constantly being forced and exploited, which I think what most of us have been done, I mean, most of the conversations I've had with people in the last few days, it's actually about how somebody else is exploiting this person, which is why they feel a sense of unease. And then they're not happy to be pulled in a certain direction because the direction they're being pulled in by other people is destructive.
It's not their purpose.
It's not their purpose. And I think, but they're not being allowed that room to discover their purpose, and I think because I've been a lecturer teaching media, one of the things that surprised me with the 16 to 18-year-olds was that when they were trying to do the courses, they were saying, George, tell me what I need to do. And I said, but if I tell you what to do, you can't get the higher grades. This isn't school where you have to obey the teacher. This is where you now get a chance within a certain framework to learn what you would like to do. And a lot of those youngsters were given a certain sense of freedom for that. In fact, it was really interesting because on Monday, I met one of those, my past students. Now, he happened to be working in a pet shop. And a lot of people say, oh, yeah, he didn't succeed. He didn't accomplish anything. But I said, well, look, he's still doing, he says, yeah, I'm still passionate about my photography. I'm doing weddings and I'm doing this. But this just gives me a chance to relax and just generate a bit of money. And I said, good, because I know that while you follow your passion, you have to quite often do another thing and make sure that that doesn't eat into your time in pursuing your passion, because the passion quite often doesn't generate the income initially. It will do eventually, but you need to support it. And most people I've been talking to this week, we've had the same conversation. It's really bizarre. I'm only just realizing that. Several people I've been talking to, they've been talking about how they need to do a job to provide them with the income so they can do this other thing. And I did the same thing going into lecturing. I got this idea that to generate the income, I'll be able to get the cameras and do the other stuff I want to do. But then you get sidetracked and distracted. That takes over your life. And the things that you're passionate about suddenly get dwindled away because you've got no time to do this other thing. And that's been told to be more important. Where in reality, the important thing is the passion that you have. And I think we've both got to that stage now, thank God, for me anyway, that we've been given that space to pursue the things that we want to pursue. It still takes a lot of time. It still takes a lot of energy, but you don't mind giving that because you don't feel as though you're being exploited. And even with as I said before in the other one, the music in the film, or even the graphics, even doing the storyboard, even doing the editing, I didn't mind doing the extra bit because I was curious to see, could I do this? And what would happen? I can now use that. And again, I wasn't being made to feel, oh, you've got to hit this deadline. If you don't hit this deadline, you're out of work and never work again. And I've been told that before in certain jobs. Oh, if you do that, you'll never work again. And basically you're being threatened with fear that if you don't follow what I want you to do, you're going to be, that's your world finish, will destroy you. And that's the fear that people have, which is what keeps them stuck in these ruts that are never exploring anything else. Because if I break out of here, I'll be classed as being disobedient and all this, that, and the other. And yet the reality is that you're being disobedient to who? And that's the question. It brings us back to the angels and demons. You said ones and zeros earlier on, which is really quite good. There is only one. The zero can never be one. It's always a zero. So it's lost already in that sort of pattern. But if it's telling lies, it's destroying other people and making their lives into a zero. Whereas the fullness is the one. There are no fractions. It's all or nothing. And I think that, I know people keep saying it's not black and white. And you go, well, actually, in many cases, once you see that it's black and white, it's all one, and follow that through, you're going to get knocked to try and put you into the zero. But if you're out of the one, you're in zero, and that's it. You're lost.
Well, you're alive or you're dead.
Well, there you go. You see, it's one or the other. And I think that's the thing. Most people
actually go stop you for a second and go,
yeah.
Zero is the largest number there is. It's not infinity. It's actually, I think in physics, they said it's actually zero. Because the one is the lowest, whole. Everything else is a multiple of, and the fractions in between doesn't matter, because one up to infinity you can never reach infinity. But zero is actually, I think it's meant to be the God. It could be the God definition. It's all. It's everything. It's the biggest number.
No,
and therefore if it's everything and every by definition, if you exist as one, you're alive.
Yes.
If you're zero, you're back to the energy field. You're part of the universe. You're not alive.
Well, that's only from the physical and spiritual perspective. But the difficulty is, I think, it's about being. What I was trying to get to there was that if you're being distracted, you end up with nothing.
Yeah.
And you whereas if you go in the other direction, which is where we were talking about lies and true and lies. And again, in coding, they use this, if this is false or if this is true. And that language, you probably use it in your spreadsheets. If this is false, then go to this. And if it's not, go to the other, and those things, it's common language. We just don't realize where it's coming from. But that ones and zero type thing, as you were talking about the 1-0, I remember watching a mathematics program documentary, and I didn't realize that zero never existed. And neither did the minus numbers. It was always 1 and beyond. They had no concept of zero, of nothingness. That has only been with us since about the 12th century or something.
Well,
like
actually,
that.
Nothing doesn't exist. That's the whole point. How can nothingness exist if everything always existed and everything was there? If nothing was created or destroyed, then everything always is, and therefore nothing cannot exist.
Yes, nothing can. Yes, and that's an interesting thought, because if you look at again, going back to that kind of angels and demons, because that's the thought, that idea of
actually, there is a thing for a second. There's no way you can be nothing as an individual, because you exist, therefore you are something, you are one, you are a whole.
Yes.
The rest after that is just trappings.
But even that concept that if I exist, I'm the whole one.
Yeah.
Even when the physical body stops, I'm still spiritual. I'm not gone. Do you know what I mean? There's still that. That means you're still one. You're still there. You're still in existence.
Actually, you have one, being W. Alwyn. They say the mere statistical chance of existing in terms of history and the amount of souls and bodies that could exist, the mere fact you do, you've already won the lottery.
Yes. But the other thing that's interesting is that prior to being born into this world, we existed before. That's also, this is just a transient journey. It's also a testing ground. We've talked about testing and modeling. This is actually a testing and modeling for infinity, because infinity does exist, but as one. And when you're in one, we were talking about NDE. Some of the shows, that some of the YouTube programs on near-death experience, which led into the visitor story that I'm working on, was the fact that here you get to try things out and get tested, and as long as you're not rejected and gone into the melted back down and restart again, you get a chance to follow your dreams afterwards, to do things that you never had a chance to do here, and you've got infinity to work on that and still build up your knowledge so you can carry on growing. Those were some stories that were coming from that. In The Visitor, at the end of the story, the character meets his loved ones again, which means that they're still there. They're still one. The other part that we haven't quite got is that in the NDE stories on YouTube, people get to see their loved ones, but then they get to see the judge, which in many cases is seen as Jesus, or they get to see a judge. But quite often, it's whether or not it's all about love. And that's something, love, it's back to this love and hate kind of thing. The hate is the dark area that tries to be destructive. But if you can love and include love yourself, it's not being selfish. Selfishness is destructive, because in the end, it's not about love of self. It's the opposite. Whereas love is where you realize that you are worth something. You're worth one, as you've just been talking about. And actually, the ideas that you've been given are worth exploring, and you shouldn't be put down, which the world tends to try and do with us in this world that we live in. There's a way of trying to knock us, to put us down and see what's what. So that's where we are there. What was interesting there that you were looking at there was
No,
that
the Skype just rang in the middle because we're on Zoom, and I was just trying to warn that person not to ring in again. Just
because there's another distraction.
Yeah.
But I wonder, are we at that point where we should be bringing this to a close? Because we've
I think we've done the hour. Not that matters. And I said, we've found a slippery eel in there. There's a guardian. We all need our own guardian angel, or be aware of it. And even if we don't believe in it, that's just you're believing in yourself. I think believe in yourself. Be your own guardian angel if you don't believe in the language of it, because you need to be on your guard and you need to be doing good by yourself and not be go and take your guardian angel to go fishing for a slippery eel and find that purpose. And then you're on the right journey, I believe. Yeah.
I think, and just to fill in that one, I think if you continually question, so even if you're not sure whether there's a guardian angel there or a demon or whatever, and you're not sure whether you believe that, if you are open to the possibility, and we'll discuss, because nothing is given to you in an instant. It actually takes a lifetime to learn those things. And as I discovered even recently, when I didn't understand something, there was a revelation came to me through talking things through like this. So whichever way you're coming from, whether it's Garvin's or my perspective, it doesn't matter. As long as you're open to discussion and open to learning and open to develop your knowledge, that's the most important part. Don't reject everything, but do test it to see whether it's valid or not. But also don't become so blinded in thinking that the way that you look at things is the only way, because it's not. There's multiple ways. And that's something that is also very fascinating. You may have loads of people that think they believe the same as you, but when you get talking to them, you realize actually they don't. But they're coming from a different perspective. It's the Indians. Actually, the Indians, the Sikhs have the Indian flag is actually the same as the Irish flag, but it's got a wheel on it. But they say that all the spokes lead to the center. They lead to the one. And I thought that analogy was actually quite good as well. Well, look, folks, there's a lot to think about in this one. And actually, this is really, these are good conversations, even if it's just me and Garvin that gets to see this. They allow us to explore the journey that we're going on and what's happening. They're even allowing us to consider that going off fishing for that eel is a worthwhile activity. And even though we can't explain it and we can't necessarily justify what we're doing at all times, because we believe and trust that there's something motivating us or nudging us in a certain direction, and trust that they're not doing that for our detriment, they're doing it for our well-being, we will get to see our full purpose at the end of whatever we're trying to do. And it may just be a chapter, but in that chapter, we'll learn quite a lot. Nothing is lost. Nothing is zero. It's always one.
That zero is the bigger number, and that doesn't matter. That's I'm going for, you want from zero to hero, so from 0 to 1. And as long as we live, we're winning. I think that's it.
Yeah. Keep on living. Yes, because that's also an important thing. Without purpose, we give up life. And if you give up life, you've lost, you become zero. Keep on going to be one. Thanks very much. Thanks everybody for watching this show. If you got to watch it or if you got to listen to it, share it. But the most important part is actually talk about what we were talking about, whether your views are one way or another, but don't get into an argument. Actually explore and discuss, and that will enrich your life. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.